Again, this is section 2 of chapter 1 in American history. And it is about Native American cultures. And the main idea is several early societies developed in Northern America long before Europeans explored the continent. Geographic areas influenced Native American culture. Native American culture shared beliefs about religion and land ownership. The big idea: many diverse Native American cultures developed across the different geographic regions of North America. All right, so early societies. The earliest people in North America were hunter gatherers. After 5000 BC, some of these people learned how to farm and they settled in villages. Although less populated than South America and Mesoamerica, North America had many complex societies long before Europeans reached the continent. Anunnaki. By the 1500 BC, the people who lived in North America Southwest, like those who lived in Mesoamerica, were growing maize. One of the early farm cultures in the Southwest was the Ananazi, lived in the Four Corners region, where present-day Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and Utah met. Anunnaki farmers adapted to their new dry environment and grew maize, beans, and squash. Over time, they began to use irrigation to increase food production. By the time the Nazis settled in the area, they were already skilled basket makers. They wove straw, vines, and yucca to make containers for food and other items. And they eventually became skilled potters as well. The early Anunnaki lived in the pit houses dug into the ground. After about AD 750, they built pueblos. The above ground houses made of heavy clay called adobe. The Anunnakis built houses on top of each other, creating large multi-storied complexes. Some pueblos had several hundred rooms and could house 1,000 people. The Anunnakis often built their homes in canyon walls and had to use ladders to enter their homes. These cliff dwellings provided a strong defense against enemies. The Anunnakis also built kivas, underground ceremonial chambers. At the center of each community, kivas were sacred areas used for religious ceremonies. Some of these rituals focused on the life-giving forces of the rain and maize. The Nazis thrived for hundreds of years. After AD 300 or 1300, however, they began to abandon their villages. Scholars believe that the drought, disease, and raids by nomadic tribes from the north may have caused the Nazis to move away from their pueblos. Mound builders. Several farming societies developed in the eastern part of Northern America after 1000 BC. The Hopewell lived along the Mississippi, Ohio, and lower Missouri River valleys. They supported their large population with agriculture and trade. They built large burial mounds to honor their dead. The Hopewell culture had declined by AD 700. Another culture, the Mississippian, began to thrive in the same area. Skilled farmers and traders, the Mississippians built large settlements. Their largest city, and forgive me for not knowing how to pronounce that, Chacahooya, was located near present-day St. Louis, Missouri. It had a population of 30,000. The Mississippian built hundreds of mounds for religious ceremonies. Cahokia alone had more than 100 temples and burial mounds. These mounds had flat tops, and temples were built on top of the mounds. Many of these mounds were gigantic. Monk mounds near Collinsville, Illinois, for example, was 100 feet high and covered 16 acres. Several other mound building cultures thrived in eastern Northern America. More than 10,000 mounds have been found in the Ohio River Valley alone. Some of these mounds are shaped like birds and snakes. The mound building cultures had declined by the time European explorers reached the southeast. Their societies no longer exist by the early 1700s. Native American culture areas. Researchers use culture areas, the geographic locations that influence societies, to help them describe ancient Native American people. North America is divided into several culture areas. North and Northwest. The far north of North America is divided into the Arctic and the subarctic culture areas. Few plants grow in the Arctic because of the ground is always frozen beneath the thin top layer of soil. This harsh environment was home to two groups of people, the Inuit and the Aleut. The Inuit lived in present-day northern Alaska and Canada. Their homes were igloos, hidden tents, and huts. The Aleut, whose homes was in western and southern Alaska, lived in multifamily houses that were partially underground. The two groups shared many cultural features, including language. Both groups survived by fishing and hunting large mammals. The Aleut and Inuit also depended on dogs for many tasks, such as hunting and pulling sleds. South of the Arctic lies the subarctic, home to groups such as the Dagorib and the Montagnais people. While they followed the seasonal migration of deer, these people lived in shelters made from animal skin. At other times, they lived in villages made up of log houses. Further south, the Coahuila and the Chinook thrived, thanks to the rich supply of game, animal, fish, and wild plants that allowed large populations to increase without the need for farming. Native Americans in the Pacific Northwest carved images of totems, ancestors, or animal spirits on tall wooden poles. Totems Totem poles held great religious and historical significance for Native Americans of the Northwest. Feasts called potlatches were another unique or unusual aspect of these Native American cultures. At these gatherings, hosts, usually chefs, chiefs, or wealthy people, gave away most of their belongings as gifts. In this way, the host increased their social importance. West and Southwest. Further south along the Pacific coast was the California region, which included the area between the Pacific and the Sierra Nevada range. And food sources were plentiful, so farming was not necessary. One major plant food was acorns, which was ground into flour. People also fished and hunted deer and other game. Most Native Americans in the California region lived in groups and families of about 50 to 300. Along these groups included the Hopa, Miwok, the Yukuts. More than 100 languages were spoken. The area east of the Sierra Nevada, the Great Basin, received little rain. To survive, Native Americans adapted to the dire climate by gathering seeds, digging roots, and trapping small animals for food. Most groups in this area included the uh, Paiute, the Shoshan, and the Ute, spoken the same languages. The Southwest Culture region included the present-day states of Arizona and New Mexico and parts of Colorado and Texas. Pueblo groups such as the Hopi and the Zuni lived there. Like the Ananazis, the Native Americans also adapted to dry culture. The Pueblo irrigated the land and grew maize, squash, and beans. These crops were vital to Southwestern people. The Pueblo region focused on two key areas of Pueblo life: rain and maize. The Pueblo performed religious rituals hoping to bring rain and a successful maize crop for their peoples. Pueblo peoples were settled and built multi-storied houses out of adobe bricks. Over time, their towns grew larger, and some towns had more than 1,000 residents. Pueblo people made fine pottery that featured beautiful painted designs. So, as you can see on this map, it's Northern America culture areas. You've got the Arctic up here in the light pink. The subarctic is this green area, which is current day Canada. And then you have the plateau and the Great Basin down here in the yellow. You've also got the Northwest in the red, or Northwest coast in the red. And then the California is in yellow. And then the green is your Great Basin, which the Rocky Mountains exist in. And then down here, you've got your southeast, and you have your plateau. And then your southwest is the pink, which is kind of like mixed in right here in the red. The Apache and the Navajo also lived in the Southwest. These groups were nomadic. They moved from place to place, hunting small animals and foraging for food. The Apache and Navajo also supported themselves by raiding the villages of the Pueblos and others. The Great Plains. The huge Great Plain region stretches south from Canada into Texas. This culture area is bordered by the Mississippi Valley on the east and the Rocky Mountains on the west. The plains were mainly grasslands, home to millions of buffalo, deer, elk, and other game also thrived there. Most Great Plains peoples were nomadic hunters. Many groups hunted buffalo using bows and spears. Blackfoot and Arapaho hunters sometimes chased the animals over cliffs, drove them into the corrals, and trap them in a ring of fire. Native Americans used buffalo skin for shields, clothing, and coverings for their teepees, cone-shaped shelters. Some plains groups were farmers. The Maddens and the Pawnee settled in villages and grew corn, beans, and squash. The Pawnee lived in round lodges made of dirt. Like some of the other Native American groups, Pawnee society was matriarchal. Mm. This means that people trace their ancestry through their mothers, not their fathers. Northwest and Southwest. Eastern Northern North America was rich in sources for food and shelter. Animals, plants, foods, fish, and wood for housing were plentiful in the region's woodlands and river valleys. Most southeastern groups, including the Cherokee Creek Seminole, lived in farming villages governed by village councils. In the Northeast, groups like the Algonquin survived by hunting and gathering plants. Those in the South farmed, hunted, gathered plants, and fished. Many tribes used strings of beads known as wampum for money. To the east of the Algonquin lived the Iroquois. They were farmers, hunters, and traders who lived in the long houses or rectangular homes made from logs and bark that housed 8 to 10 families. The Iroquois created Iroquois League. This confederation or alliance was established by the Cayuga, Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, and the Seneca. The League waged war against and made peace with non-Iroquois peoples. The goal was to strengthen the alliance against invasion. The League helped the Iroquois become one of the most powerful Native American peoples in North America. Sorry about the pronunciation on some of these names. Shared beliefs. Although they were different culturally and geographically, Native American groups of North America shared certain beliefs. The region of the most North American peoples, for example, was linked to nature. Native Americans believed in spiritual forces that were everywhere, dwelling in heavenly bodies and in sacred places in the earth. Spirits even lived within animals and plants. Native Americans tried to honor the spirits in their daily lives. Ceremonies maintained the group's relationship with the earth and sky, which were believed to be the sustainers of life. In addition, individuals who wanted help prayed to the spirits' protectors. Native Americans also shared beliefs about property. They believed that individual ownership only applied to the crops they grew. The land itself was for the use of everyone in the village, and the person's right to use it was temporary. Native Americans also thought they should preserve the land for future generations. These beliefs contrasted sharply with those of the Europeans, a difference that would cause conflict. Despite their shared beliefs, the diverse culture groups of North America had little interest in joining together into a large political unit. As a result, Native Americans on the North American continent did not form large empires like the Aztecs and Incas of Mesoamerica and South America did. Summary and preview. People of North America formed many complex societies. In the next section, you will learn about the societies in West Africa.